Hello, welcome to CoinBlog. I'm Charles, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Universa ICO and the EOS ICO. I know what you're thinking, why am I making a video about the EOS ICO? It's already a few months old now. Well, the EOS ICO is actually unique in that it's going to be running for 1 year long, and it's trying to solve some of the problems that the Universa ICO, which is coming out in a few weeks now, wants to solve. So I thought I'd include it in this review. So we can see here that, I just want to add, I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Always do your own due diligence, and I'm not paid or sponsored in any way to make these videos. So we can see here that the total amount of money that they're trying to raise is substantial. With Universa, they're looking to raise $99 million, which is a lot of money. EOS has already raised almost $200 million to date. So it's obviously an ongoing crowd sale, so that number will increase as time goes on. With the token supply, Universa is exceptionally high, 14 billion. To put it into perspective, I think the Tron ICO is releasing 40 billion tokens, and Ripple is currently at about 37 billion. So 14 billion isn't anywhere near those figures, but it's still very substantial. EOS is raising 1 billion tokens, but it's important to note that it is an inflationary cryptocurrency. Many people don't mention that, but it is. And it will be having an annual inflation after the ICO of 5%. The circulating supply of Universa is set at 10 billion tokens. The circulating supply at the time of recording for EOS is around 200 million tokens. And obviously it's an ongoing project, so there's more tokens released every day. 2 million tokens to be precise. So you've got inflation to worry about there. The cost per token with the Universa is you'll be getting 1 UTN token for every 1 cent that you put into the ICO. With EOS, actually have a unique system where they basically take the total number of EOS tokens being released for the day and divide it by the amount of ether that's put in to the ICO for that day. Then we have the date of token issue. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't find that anywhere on Universa, which is annoying. If I'm looking to do a flip or short-term investment, then I want to know when I'm going to get that token. That's very important. With EOS, you get the token immediately, so you can basically trade it on an exchange. Now, the big idea, what are they trying to solve, basically? What are they trying to offer to the cryptocurrency community? Well, Universa is essentially a blockchain. It's a cooperative ledger of licensed and trusted nodes that performs scaling solutions at tens of thousands of transactions per second. Universa is unique because it wants to verify transactions geographically to make sure that incoming data and TX speeds are accurate. Now, EOS is also a blockchain-based protocol, but it essentially wants to be a decentralized operating system. Like conventional operating systems, EOS is designed to support databases, accounts with permissions, and things of that nature. This functionality uses an architecture that can handle millions of transactions per second with 0 transaction fees. So again, they're both trying to solve the same problem. They're looking at businesses, and they really want to reduce transaction times, transaction speeds, latency, something that Ethereum has tried to do, but obviously Ethereum has gas costs involved. Now, is there hype in the crypto community for either one of these ICOs? With Universa, the answer is no, but it does have over 2,000 Telegram users. This is an outlier, essentially, and what it's telling me is that because it's a Russian ICO, there's more popularity on other social media platforms that I'm not privy to, like VK, which is the Russian equivalent of Facebook. But I do believe that there are people talking, promoting and marketing this project outside of the Anglo-Saxon and Western world. So that is important to bear in mind. Now with EOS, the answer is an unequivocal yes. There's an extremely large amount of hype for this project. EOS is one of the most anticipated ICOs, but has had declining hype as the ICO has dragged on. It has one of the best ICO marketing plans I've ever seen. The EOS brand is edgy and distinct and exudes a coolness increasing the likelihood of a buy-in from rookie or inexperienced investors. That's an important thing to note. Investors who don't do their homework, investors who don't do their research are going to blindly follow the crowd and buy into things that have the most bells and whistles. And I feel like EOS has a lot of bells and whistles. Now, do these ICOs have a strong and charismatic leader? A leader who can really follow through, on what he says and execute according to the roadmap that's laid out in their white paper? So I would actually have to say the answer is yes. With Universa, the CEO is an Alexander Borodich, and Borodich actually founded the Venture Club in 2013, which is a private financing platform for early stage Russian and Eastern European and Lithuanian startups. Borodich was also the former marketing director of mail.ru, one of the largest Russian email and service providers. Borodich also lectured at the Moscow State University for 14 years while investing in tech startups. Now, the CTO is a red flag in my opinion. Sergey Chenov claims to be the former CTO at ICO, an app development company. I checked out the analytics on the site and it's not good. It's basically just a single page website. I couldn't get any metrics or data from it. He also claimed to have founded an electronic and software development company called Cybico and another company called Tansha. I couldn't verify any of these claims. The companies do exist. They were kind of medium-sized enterprises in the late and early noughties. But since then, it looks like they haven't gone under, but there's not really much happening with them. And I could find their team members, but I couldn't find anything to verify Sergey's claims. That's a strike against the team for Universa. Now, if we have a look at EOS, their CEO is charismatic in my opinion. Brendan Bloomer is the founder of Block One, the parent company of EOS. Bloomer's businesses include virtual currency trading in online multiplayer games in the US. He also has a real estate portal in Hong Kong called OK.com. He's also the founder and CEO of One Group in India, which is another real estate platform. There's many videos of him on YouTube. He's fresh-faced, he's young, he's a natural orator. I think Bloomer can convey complex ideas to those not in the know, meaning he is ideally suited to sell the ideals of EOS and cryptocurrency in general to those resistant to change, especially those in government and high authority positions. So, if EOS does live up to its claims, and it does claim to be something bigger than it already is now, they've got the perfect frontman, the perfect figurehead to really follow through on those commitments and promote EOS to the wider community who aren't in the know. Now, the CTO is Dan Larimer, which most of you probably have heard of. Dan Larimer is well known for founding Steam and BitShares and is a tried and tested entrepreneur. There's many interviews of him online. He comes across as smart, articulate and to the point. However, I do feel that he does lack the charisma of Steve Jobs, but he makes up for that with his grit and readiness to get things done. Do either one of these ICOs have a working product or prototype? With Universa, the answer is no. It's essentially just a white paper idea. However, that said, it has a very active GitHub page, but the contributors timeline only goes back 2 months. So it's an active GitHub page, but it's only showing me 2 months worth of history. There's no reason for that. Why, with such a large and substantial project that's going to be coming to market in the next couple of weeks, I would have wanted to see something going back to 2016 or even further back. I thought this is meant to be a big project. And with EOS, they don't actually have a prototype. There's little in the way of an actual roadmap. However, EOS's GitHub is one of the most impressive I've seen. So what problem or pain point do both these projects want to solve? So Universa essentially wants to become a blockchain solution for the future of internet protocols. If Ethereum or EOS could provide an alternate solution, there may not have been a market share for Universa. However, unlike Ethereum and Bitcoin, the Universa protocol does not need to store a full history of all blockchain transactions. Documents and legal agreements are tokenized on client through the use of sidechains using a process called the directed acyclical graph. The language used may be different, but Universa essentially applies the same delegated proof-of-stake logic as EOS to validate its transactions. Despite having a technically sound white paper, the Universa project lacks communication with Western investors. The Universa team doesn't have a minimal viable product and can't compete against well-funded fintech startups in the cryptocurrency space. So again, Universa on paper looks promising, but when you dig a little bit deeper, when you dig under the surface, you'll actually find that things don't add up. The language they use is highly technical, and there's nothing wrong with that per se, but I just feel there's an element of bullshit going on. Like Universa, EOS basically wants to speed up blockchain transactions, but current and near-term blockchain platforms can't actually match the scale of content delivery systems like Facebook or transaction speeds like you have with Visa. EOS's goal is to create the equivalent of an early 90s web server using cryptographic techniques found in Bitcoin and Ethereum. Every time users interact with the Neo or Ethereum network, they have to pay a gas or transaction fee. EOS goes beyond this by using a delegated proof-of-stake protocol, which has zero transaction fees and wants to be an operating system for decentralized applications. Yet EOS's protocol validates transactions through licensed and trusted nodes that are verified by third parties or delegates. Now, these delegates are responsible for creating blocks and are unable to change transaction details. This requires a fair bit of trust, which makes the concept of EOS far less appealing. So, for all it's worth, EOS wants to be this impartial blockchain, but I think you really do have to have a high degree of trust in the development team behind the EOS project. It's not like Bitcoin where there's no human agency. I would say EOS is actually heavily reliant on human agency, and that's something to be very aware of. So what about the market timing and entry for both of these ICOs? Is the market, the ICO, entering non-existent or oversaturated? So with EOS and with many other projects I look at, it's essentially the same thing. We basically need a figurehead. We need a Steve Jobs in the crypto space to remove obfuscating elements like wallet addresses, cold storage devices, side chains, all these things that basically hinder mass adoption of cryptocurrency. You know, Neo, Ethereum, Archain, EOS, Qtum, IOTA are all essentially competing to create a blockchain for smart contracts. Whether Universa can move smart contracts into something as relatable and simple as a single-purpose app like the iPhone did for mobile technologies is debatable. So what about EOS? How does the market timing and entry relate to that project? So I think EOS doesn't have a first mover advantage, but then again, if you look at the founding of Facebook, neither did Zuckerberg. You know, Zuckerberg didn't have a first mover advantage. I mean, you know, do you remember MySpace? Do you remember Rhapsody? You know, these things already existed long before Facebook or Spotify took over, and they essentially took over the whole market. Risk and rampant speculation essentially hinders the mass adoption of cryptocurrencies. Blockchain-based operating systems are a very nascent market and are at least 10 years away from mass adoption. Both of these projects are ERC20 platforms. EOS is obviously starting on Ethereum, but it's building its own blockchain protocols. And it's a similar story for Universa. It's launching as a ERC20 token, and they want to build a platform, but I found their white paper lacking, and there was little in the way of detail about how they were going to provide that. So how do token holders get paid? How do you and I make money by investing in these tokens without just buying them and then flipping them on the market? So with Universa, all transactions that use decentralized apps basically require their tokens if you use their protocol. The more usage the Universa platform has, the more valuable the UNT tokens will become. Each day, 1% of transaction fees retained by Universa will be burned or destroyed, removing them from circulation, causing a deflationary effect on the currency. So as you already know from my previous videos, I love deflationary cryptocurrencies. Even though I think they could have burned a little bit more than 1%, I do think that is a good thing. Now with EOS, it's the opposite. They're inflationary. EOS tokens are needed to perform different functions for applications built on the EOS blockchain. The more users and developers the network has, the more valuable EOS tokens should become. So again, it's a similar story. Basically, the more users and developers and apps that are built on the EOS platform, the more of a network effect it would have, and the more your tokens will appreciate in value over time. So what are the potential use cases for both of these platforms? So with Universa, I think it's your classic kind of smart contract provider, and it's also billing itself to be, the next Ethereum, although we're not seeing details about how they're going to do that. Each year, thousands of businesses go bankrupt while waiting for their invoices to be paid. And billions of these invoices are shared between companies using legacy systems and outdated email formats, creating errors and additional work. A smart contract on the Universa blockchain would be able to document invoices directly on the ledger. Customers would be able to forward their digital signatures at the optimal date of remuneration. Businesses of offline services would then be able to detect delays immediately. This would also happen less often due to machine learning and payment reputation systems that grow algorithmically as the Universa protocol develops. So if you look at something like Google Now does not understand what an object is unless data about it is specifically fed into the system. Agnostic smart contracts like Chainlink could surface information to the user via a decentralized Universa operating system. So, it's good stuff really, Universa, what they want to do. Whether they can actually pull it off is another matter. Now with EOS, the potential use cases are unlimited. However, that said, it's still quite abstract. So again, I do apologize. Technology is all about paradigm shifts. The shift between paradigms always happens in phases. The advent of the command line in the 1960s transitioned into graphical user interfaces in the 1980s, which in turn migrated into windowing systems in the 1990s, and to where we are today with mobile applications in the 2000s. The user interface of a decentralized EOS operating system would function much like an Android emulator would, where multiple versions of the same event or operating system would be created and destroyed. Instead of having external apps process your data like we have today, the data of your next meeting, document, or email would be held by the EOS operating system, and decentralized apps would merely be a user interface visualization of that data. So several years ago, I used to experiment with emulators myself, and if you have like a Windows operating system, you can basically have an app on that system where you have multiple emulated versions of your Android phone on your computer. You can have 10, 20, 30, 40 emulations of your Android or iOS phone on your computer, all running at the same instance. And you can actually create and delete instances or versions of each operating system as they work independently on your computer. So I think with EOS, you'll have a similar kind of format where you have cards or operating systems functioning independently of one another in a decentralized way. Each instance or event of the EOS operating system would be ranked by importance to the user. Users would be able to access data anonymously for a range of activities using the EOS operating system the same way a drug dealer uses a burner phone. So essentially, the best analogy I can give you is a drug dealer with a burner phone. Just like you have a disposable phone with a number on, you use it once and then you dispose of it, you'd be able to do the same thing with a computer operating system using the EOS protocol. Again, I am making massive generalizations here, and this is just my own opinion. This is just something I would be really excited to see in a decentralized format on a computer. So what about the strengths and weaknesses As you know, I like to do a SWOT analysis towards the end of my review. So with Universa, I think Universa features a protocol similar to IOTA, Byteball, and Array blocks, which uses a rare method of blockchain technology where smart contracts can be updated as the code itself executes, resulting in near instantaneous transaction times. So just like with Stratus and sidechaining, Universa will be able to actually, instead of having a whole backlog, a history of transactions on the blockchain, which chain back to the previous chain of events, so on and so forth, to the first genesis of the blockchain, you will actually have side chains working in tandem with the agents, using them, with the agents who are actually making the smart contracts, thereby actually saving computer power. Also, another thing I like about Universa is it's deflationary, like numeri and economy. Now with EOS, there's several strengths to it. I think EOS's main competitor, Ethereum, demands users to pay for every transaction, and EOS recognizes this, and because it's basically fighting against Ethereum, it wants to do everything it can to distinguish itself from its main competitor, obviously. So there's going to be zero transaction fees. It uses a proof of stake protocol, delegated proof of stake protocol, where you basically hold your EOS tokens, and in holding them, that will generate hashing power, which will make the networks function without mining without mining in the traditional sense, like you would have with something like proof of work with Bitcoin, for example. Also, EOS focuses on the end user experience and formulates a technology to accommodate its customers. Again, this is highly subjective, and I'm in no way an Apple fanboy, but I do think if you look at something like Apple, I think they really do a tremendous job of basically focusing on the end user experience. And I think EOS, even though they haven't got a prototype, this is kind of what they're working towards. So, kudos to them for doing that. And again, I think due to the nature of its crowd sale, anyone who wants to participate in it can. Now, there's actually some negatives to this, but on one level, it's a positive thing because it means that anyone can get in. And the crowd sale, as I've mentioned, is actually running for a year. Now, if we look at the negatives, we can actually see there's quite a few. With Universa, the Universa team feels very weak, and while they do have a very strong leader, the CTO lacks credentials for the senior position that he's in. That is a red flag right there. I mean, when you invest in an ICO, you could basically throw everything out the window and just ask 3 very simple questions. First, determine, is the ICO a scam? Second, determine, is there massive hype in the community for this project? And finally, make sure that the token economics or the token metrics actually add up. And I think in Universa, even though I've been asking more questions than those primary 3, I can safely say that it fails on at least 2 of those questions. Also, Universa wants to raise a staggering sum of money. Again, token metrics. A high market cap reduces demand for the token because it basically means anyone who wants to buy into that ICO can, meaning there will be more sellers than buyers when the Universa token hits the open market. This is very bad for investors. With EOS, it's actually quite similar. EOS was released under an open source software contract, which basically allows third parties to modify the original software and launch their own version of it. So it's very similar to Android, meaning that third parties can essentially exclude you and I. They can exclude the original investors who funded the EOS development. So if someone basically takes a fork of EOS and does their own version of it, their own software from it, and that proves to be very popular, there's no guarantee that we're going to see positive comeback from that by investing in the original EOS token. So that's something to be aware of. There's no roadmap to specify that they've actually got a software or app out there or a beta that you can actually use. So then we have the opportunities. So I think in 2017 we've seen a massive trend towards ICOs. And Universa is a Russian-based ICO, a Lithuanian Russian-based ICO. And I think at the moment, Russia's really equivocating on whether or not to support cryptocurrencies in the future. I think a bullish move by Russia would really secure Universa in the long term in the face of strong competition abroad. Also, Universa could be very attractive, to businesses who want fast transactions. It could really, act almost like a Stratus, and really target that kind of community where you have business leaders who want to really get in on the action, but they don't actually have any Solidity or blockchain developers of their own. Another thing that Universa does is that mining pools are basically a form of centralization. A direct acyclical graph or delegated proof of stake rewards more people without skewing the community in favor of larger holders. So that's another important thing to note. If you look at Bitcoin, it's basically becoming more and more of a cartel through mining operations in East Asia, making it harder and harder to actually create a fairer distribution of wealth in the network. Now, with EOS, it essentially wants to be a copy of Ethereum, where people can host ICOs. Also, EOS is a one-year-long ICO, which should increase adoption in the cryptocurrency community. Another good thing, well, depends how you look at it, with EOS is the hysteria and irrationality which are driving the interest in the project. It's hysteria, but sometimes it does work. Then we have the threats. So what threats are really going to cause challenges for Universa and EOS? So with Universa, it wants to essentially streamline transaction speeds and verification times by storing data where it is actually relevant, namely with the user, geographically. But Universa is a Russian ICO. This puts the Universa project in a very precarious position and leaves no margin for error. They're saying that they're going to do near feeless transactions. I mean, that doesn't really mean anything. There's no facts to back that up. And with EOS, the advertising and branding for the project just screams a money grab, basically. I mean, they have an amazing marketing and branding campaign, but it really does seem like they're putting more focus on their marketing at times than they are with their actual project. Block One, the parent company of EOS, is a Cayman Islands company. There's no public oversight of what actually happens to the money raised during EOS's ICO. That's another thing to really be aware of. Also, Larimer's abrupt exit from BitShares and Steam left the platforms with no clear path ahead. Could he do the same thing to EOS? I wouldn't say that's a big deal, but it does depend on the timing. If he just decides to walk out of EOS before the EOS protocol actually has ICOs launched on its blockchain, I think that's going to be a negative thing for the protocol as a whole. The fact that they're valued at how much they are at almost 200 million and they don't even have a product. I mean, that's a red flag right there. What's my analysis? What's my take-home point for you guys? So with Universa, the project has admirable aims, yet a cursory study shows a litany of concerns. First, percentage-wise, the market cap will not be able to move the valuation of the Universa project when it hits exchanges. In other words, there won't be enough buyers to buy the UTN token when it comes to market. Second, their competitors have all-star teams. Inexperienced people just won't cut it. And thirdly, if Russia bans ICOs and cryptocurrencies, the fallout for Universa will be immense. Look at China. So I think Universa has many uphill battles to fight. Post-ICO, we should see a steep fall in the project's valuation. The odds of success are very slim, and investors should proceed with caution. With EOS, it's more positive, I think. I'm certainly more bullish. EOS wants to be the first decentralized operating system. There is going to be no substantial growth, however, in the project until native applications are built. Hysteria and misinformation have glossed over several caveats. First, the EOS protocol is inflationary, rewarding block producers and developers with a 5% annual inflation rate. Second, Ethereum has a first mover advantage and is planning to implement many scalability solutions. Whatever EOS does now, Ethereum can just pivot and do better just because it has a bigger development team and community behind it. And thirdly, anyone who wants to partake in the EOS ICO has the opportunity to do so. Does that mean short-term investors are going to sell and cause the price of EOS to crash? Making bets on a potential paradigm shift isn't without risk, but the rewards could be equally high. What is my scoring for these ICOs? I think ultimately with Universa, there's less pros and more cons. Short term, it's not good just because of the amount of money they want to raise. Also, they want to release 14 billion tokens. That's a substantial sum. In the medium term, it's really going to be hard to tell where they're going to go. You've got Qtum, you've got IOTA, you've got NEO. They're all trying to do the same thing that Universa is trying to do. And although I think they do have a large market in Russia and Eastern Europe, I don't think they're really listening to Western investors, and I haven't really seen anything in the way of marketing on Facebook or Twitter as I would have liked to have seen from the company. And in the long term, it's very difficult to make a judgment. It really does depend on the local climates in Russia and Eastern Europe and how they're going to proceed with ICOs and regulations. If that works out positively, then there could be something for Universa in the future. But ultimately, they're not really, their USP isn't there. There isn't anything to really say that I should really buy into this. And I don't think their reward program is good enough. So I would have liked to have seen some kind of long-term reward system or even a masternode, something along those lines. I'm going to give it 4.5. I was actually going to rate them higher, but the fact that they wanted to raise so much money meant I couldn't do so. So I think that's a fair mark. Now with EOS, I was very bullish to begin with, but the more I researched them, the more risk really the project became. So obviously it's difficult analysing things with the benefit of hindsight. The ICO I believe was in late June, and obviously the price went all the way up to about $5.5, even $6, and then it just plummeted because of the amount of money they wanted to raise, and because there were no barriers to entry. Anyone who wanted to partake in the ICO could, which just caused the whole price of EOS to crash. So your next strategy now is to actually figure out the perfect time on when to invest in EOS. The trick is to really calculate your best entry point and work out the dynamics of the ICO participation system, because it is a little bit complex. In the medium term, I don't really see much happening. I think the price is actually going to continue going down because the project's still in its ICO stage. And in the long term, I'm very bullish on EOS. I think EOS could be an excellent investment just because of Dan Larimer and what he's done for BitShares and Steam. Now, I know there are a lot of critics out there, and I accept people do label him as, some people even call him like a Ponzi scammer, which I do think is a bit harsh. But ultimately, I do see EOS as a worthy contender to Ethereum. And if they can pull this off, even with the 5% annual inflation, if EOS is worth the same valuation as Ethereum is today, then the tokens will be worth $30. I do think EOS has a bright future ahead of it. Again, this is just my opinion, and this is a very long-term investment. You're not going to make your money back from EOS for at least 2 years, maybe more. So let me know what you thought about my review. Be sure to like and comment, and of course subscribe and hit that notification button, because I've got loads more videos for you guys. So thank you so much for watching. All the best.